back for a second session on how do I read my Bible. And so last time we talked about the paradise. Oops, I put my R too soon. The paradise of how we're supposed to read Scripture, right? And we talked about the pyramid. P-R-D-S, right? We talked about Peshat, which is the literal meaning of the text. We talked about Remez, which is sort of the allegorical or typological meaning of the text. We talked about Drash, that is the interpretation of the text, usually a moral or legal or a homiletical interpretation. And then we have the little smallest part of our food pyramid, Sod, which is like the mystical or apocalyptic meaning of the text. So today we're really going to deal with just these two. We're going to talk about Peshat and Remez today, right? And so we're going to talk about literal and typological meaning. Now, this is, in many ways, where we're going to spend the initial stages of reading our text. This is where all of the heavy lifting works, right? Like, I want to think of it like building this little pyramid or building our building, right? We're going to have to put a lot of work into our foundation, making sure that we get it all laid straight, making sure we have it level, making sure we have it smoothed off, because when we come in and start building our building on top of this, we need to have a good foundation to build it off of. Okay? So, if our literal and typological meaning is the first step, is the biggest portion of our food pyramid in terms of reading our scripture, is really the first steps that we're going to build in building the building, we need to make sure we get it right. Okay, so let me talk about the different levels that we can maybe not levels, the different approaches we can use. Okay, so we have our English Bible, right? We have our translation that we prefer and we use. There are a lot of different variations of this, okay? So let me first talk about the theory of that. Let's talk about English translations. So, a quick and easy sort of way to think about translations is whether we care for word accuracy or whether we care about thought accuracy. Now, you're thinking to yourself, hold on, don't I want both word accuracy and thought accuracy? Yes, excellent. However, the problem is that when you translate anything, French into English, English into French, Hebrew into English, Greek into English, the ancient world into the modern world, whenever we have to put on the decoder ring, we have to sort of free ourselves a little bit from having both. We would love to have both. And in fact, when people translate the Bible, they put in years of time of studying the text, of years of time sometimes, of accurately translating the text, of thinking about how they want to go. But the problem is that different languages give us different ways of understanding things. Right? So in English, there is one word for the second person in a sentence, the you. Right? You and you are both the singular and the plural, right? So you are going to the store, or you are all Americans, right? Now, if you come from certain parts of America, you might use y'all, or you'ns, or yous guys, but the word you itself needs to either be adapted, y'all, you'ns, you guys, or it has to, within the context of the sentence, you are an American, you are all Americans, you can get what the meaning of that word is, right? So when we bring it over, we have to change it. So if you're going into French, for instance, in French, there are two words for the second person. There is tu and vous. There is the singular you and the plural you. But in French, tu and vous also connote a informality or a formality, right? So vous, which is the plural, is also used when you are speaking to someone whom you were not as familiar with, right? When you're speaking to someone more formally, right? You say to your friend, tu, and you say to the police officer, vous, right? So even though there's a singular and plural, there still is also the idea of formality, informality, right? There's things that are entangled in there. What if I know you singularly, but I don't know you formally? Right? So you see what I'm saying? Like we even when we bring it into languages in the modern world, we have to go either with the accuracy of maybe the tense or the gender or the person or the word accuracy of a term, or we've got to go closer to the thought accuracy. Do I want to talk about a formal or an informal sense of how I know you? Okay? So on this metric, we have a lot of different ways of looking at it. So I'll give you some very common examples, right? Sort of in the middle is your NIV translation. It really tries to split down the middle, and that was their intention. When they translated it, they were trying to equally balance accuracy of the words and a sort of a word-to-word correspondence and accuracy of the meaning, a thought-to-thought correspondence. Okay? Over on the word accuracy side, a very common one that a lot of people use is the New American Standard. And if you read the New American Standard, it reads a little weird sometimes. It kind of sounds kind of almost too formal, and that's because it's keeping a word accuracy. And basically, they only move words around in the sentence to make them make sense in English. But other than that, they're going to give you kind of this choppy word-for-word translation right down the line, right? All the way on the other side of this, over here, would be something like an interlinear translation, where you're going to have the Hebrew or the Greek, and then they're going to literally put the English translation that they have of that word under the word, and it's not going to make English sense because it's in a Hebrew format or a Greek format, not the English format. Okay, over here on sort of the thought accuracy side, we have something maybe like the Message translation. And if you read that, it's really beautiful. It communicates these wonderful English poetic phrases, right? Eugene Peterson did a very good job of kind of bringing the whole context into his translation. But you'll see that because it's thought accurate, if you will, kind of deviates off of what the Hebrew actually says, or the Greek actually says, right? This is more of understanding the text. This is more of understanding the text, right? Understanding the text and understanding the text. Okay, so that's one layer there. Now, your only option to go beyond this in translations is to go to this kind of bad boy. This is the Greek translation. This is the Greek of the Bible. Now, this is an eclectic version of the Bible. And I pulled out my one that looked like my other one, so it has like margins and stuff. What this is, and I'll get a little bit closer to the camera so you can see, is what we have generated from the fragments and the scrolls and the manuscripts that we have extant. All of what the Greek text of this is in Luke, for instance. Okay? Now, at the bottom is this nice little apparatus that scares everybody because it's got all sorts of sigla and symbols and abbreviations in there. What that is telling us is that this text is a composite, right? We have all of these different fragments, right? It's been 2,000 years since we wrote the New Testament, and so the text don't preserve for that long. The books start falling apart. And so we have all these little fragments, and someone had to sit down, it was a committee in this case, of people sit down and put it back together. And what they do is they say, okay, this part comes from this fragment, and this part comes from this fragment. And here's another fragment that had a different spelled word, or here's a fragment that had slightly the same, it's a different word, but it means sort of the same thing. And they give you all the different options down here of what it is. Okay, so this is where the English translation comes from. We start with this, the Greek eclectic text, and then we translate it for you into the English text, right? So I'm doing a thing here, behind the English translation is the Greek version, or the Greek text that we're going to use to translate it. Okay, how do we go from this to that? That's what we're going to talk about Bible study. Now, why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because we're going to do our reading of the text in our English translation, unless you want to go to school and learn how to read Greek and Hebrew so that you can do it yourself. And we're going to talk about the sort of a variation onto that. Okay, so our second thing is what I'm going to call our commentary aids. What are we going to use to get the literal or typological meaning of the text? And what I'm going to show you is those are connected. We can distinguish them based on this concept of I'm just translating the phrase, or I'm looking at what that phrase means. There's a difference between the two of Peshat and Remez about where we might put what we're doing in. We can kind of compartmentalize them in. But these two are connected because in the modern world, you can't read things literally without understanding them in a topological sense. Let me talk about what I mean by that. Okay, so our first thing, again, I'm going to put another different aid on here, right? We're going to have another different spectrum. Okay, so our first sort of route on the journey is what I'm going to call interlinear helps. Okay, so I don't have an interlinear Bible with me, because I don't own an interlinear Bible anymore. But what I have here is what's called Lexical Aids Students of Hebrew Testament Greek, and this is by Bruce Metzger. And what he does is he's basically made a list, let me get it where you can see it, a list of the Greek words with the English definition beside them. Right? And so he has the Greek word and the English definition. So you're reading your text, and you come along and you find it. Now, why is this an interlinear help? Because this is only going to work if you have a Greek text and an English text and you're trying to find the bridge between the two. You're trying to use your decoder ring. Let me go back to Hebrew and English, right? So in French and English. In French class, when you're trying to, you're in Paris and you're trying to order a popcorn and Coke, you get your interlinear helps out, you get your French-English dictionary out, and you're like, je voudrais un coca, right? And you find your phrase book, right? That's what this is, right? So on one level, you're going to have a phrase book, and it's going to connect it from one to the other. This is going to be more on that word accuracy side. Right? If you have an interlinear version of the Bible where you've got the Greek over the English or the Hebrew over the English, and you're going back and forth, and then you take your phrase book and you try to figure it out the decoder style directly, you're going to be closer to this word accuracy. That's one way of learning meaning. That is one idea. Now, the next one over here in the middle is where we might put our Strong's Concordance. Okay? Now again, I couldn't find my Strong's Concordance this morning when I was packing up the church. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my lexicon with me, because it's the same thing. A Strong's Concordance and a lexicon are basically two sides of the same coin. Okay, so Strong, back in the 1890s, if I remember correctly, went through the Hebrew and the English Bible, and he found all of the variations of those words, and he classified the words in this text where he puts them with numbers. Okay, so when you talk about Strong's Concordance, or you talk about Strong's numbers, or you talk about word studies, that's what you're doing. You're doing the same thing here with the lexicon. The lexicon is just more of a, maybe we might call it, it comes from the other side. It comes from the the translator side. So again, let me pull it back up, right? So in my text here, I have the word gamos, which means seed or marriage, right? And then I have all of the different examples of that in the text, okay? What I want to focus in on here is this idea, that I have meaning one, marker of cause or reason, for gamos. And then I have right after it all of the examples of that particular word in the text. And then what they do here in this commentary, this, by the way, if you care about it, is the BDAG version of the Greek lexicon. They give you examples from other texts in other works that use that same phrase, what we might call extra biblical literature or extra biblical parallels. Okay, why is that important? That is how we write dictionaries, right? So your dictionaries which tell you what a word means are created historically and even today by finding all the examples of the words, right? So we're going to look for the word green. We're going to find in a whole bunch of examples in the Bible or in Shakespeare or in the 100 most popular books in North America in the year 2020, whatever, right? We're going to collect what's called a corpus together, and that corpus could be the entire Greek New Testament and every word we find in it. It could be, all the most popular books at the time. It could be every example of a piece of literature within a certain time period, whatever. You pick your corpus, and then you literally spend years of your life going through and documenting every single word and how many times it occurs and what the other context clues are, and puts it together, and that's how we understand it. By the way, that's how you learned language to begin with. When I teach my little boy words, right, then I'm going to say things like, see the green triangle? Oh, the grass is so green. Your shirt is green, right? I keep emphasizing the word green. That sound, that phoneme, green, starts to get connected with a certain phenomenon, in this case, a color. And that is how we learn that green is this color, because daddy and mommy and everyone keeps pointing and saying, green, 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 green. Okay? That's how we learn language, and that's how we still use language, right? So we're going to take our concordance or our dictionary or our lexicon, it's all the same thing, and we're going to go look up words in the dictionary. Now this is a little bit more involved, because it's not in context, right? You got to flip back and forth all through the different pages to put the sentence together. It's not the interlinear help, where it's already put the word, it's already showed you which English and which Hebrew or which English and which Greek word go together. This is sort of like level 2.0. But it's 2.0 also because we're going to move and see the connection between literal and typological meaning. So let me drill down on this to emphasize it some more. We understand words in a context. Here, we have a context because we have the English and the Hebrew side by side, and that's the context by which we understand things. Here, with the dictionary, with the concordance, with the lexico, whatever, we understand the context because now we're going to go in a different way, right? So interlinear helps we understand words in the series of the sentence. So this might be the interlinear way of doing things. And then the other way is to understand every instance of that word. Okay? So the green ball rolled across the street. Right? The green ball rolled across the street is the in context, in the sentence phrase, where, like, this is sort of back in second grade when you had to fill in the blank, right? The blank ball rolled across the street. Round, green, yellow, sassafras, right? And you had to pick the correct word out to fill in the sentence. That's what we might call a horizontal context. And then the other one is the vertical context. Green grass, green shirt, green hair, green as a color concept, green sky, green eggs and a ham, right? Every instance of a word that occurs within the corpus, the vertical understanding. The two are not disconnected. When you decode language, you are going back and forth between the horizontal in context and what I might call sentence or thought context, and then the vertical word context or dictionary context, okay? Both of those have to go together. Now, the farthest towards thought accuracy might be something like a true commentary. In a true commentary, the scholar, the pastor, whoever, has come in and brought different things together. And here, right here, we might talk about corpus. And here we talk about maybe sentence context. And over here, we're going to talk about comparisons. Okay? And so this is where I want to move now into the typological meaning. The literal meaning might be the context clues of the words within the sentence. Right beside that is the corpus, understanding the context of the words together. Now we're going to move to the comparison, right? So we're going to talk about something like this. We're going to talk about types. Okay? Biblical interpretation is very interested in type, right? Very interested in things that connect, right? So last time I talked about that within the remez we might have something called gezerah shava. Gezerah shava is the Hebrew term, the Aramaic Hebrew term for putting two words together, right? I see a green ball and a green grass, right? And because I have that corpus understanding where I see that words occur more in different contexts and in different ways but still have the same meaning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now make this a connection between these two so that I know that the ball is always played in the grass. Now you're going, hold on, that doesn't make any sense. Green ball doesn't mean that it has green grass, but in gezerah shava it does. In gezerah shava, if we see the word happening here, we see the word happening here, we know that the two are connected. Okay? So, for instance, a very classic one is at the beginning of Genesis. It says, the Spirit of the Lord was hovering over the surface of the water. That word for hovering occurs also in the book of Deuteronomy, talking about the wings of an eagle that rest over her chicklets and protect them, right? And so the connection is made. God hovers over the water in Genesis. The eagle hovers over over her young in Deuteronomy. So God was protecting the earth in the creation. Do you see how we made that connection? Because hovering over here meant protection. Then hovering over here also makes protection. That's how we understand words in a typological way, right? The word hovering doesn't mean protecting itself. It really just talks about the idea of an action of like flying with wings and staying in one spot, right? The actual dictionary meaning of the word hovering is to sort of do a certain kind of action. But the typological meaning, the symbolic meaning, the interpretative meaning is that hovering means protecting. Right? We talk about this all the time. We have all sorts of symbols in our world that we use, right? We talk about a strong jaw, right? A strong jaw is something that means we have like sort of virility and masculinity and strength, right? But what does your jawbone have to do with masculinity and virility? It has to do with the symbolism of what that connotes, right? Now we're moving from definition to metaphor. Let me write that down. We're moving from definition, what does a word mean in its context, Daddy, right? Let me learn the words. And we're moving into the context of metaphor. And that's where the remez comes into place. So I'm going to close with this example. When we say that Jesus is the new Adam, this occurs in the book of Romans. Jesus is the new Adam. What do we mean by that? Well, we're pointing back. Okay, so we're over here in Romans, and Jesus is Adam. And that is going to metaphorically point us back to the book of Genesis, in which we have Adam as the first human. So, when Paul in the book of Romans says Jesus is the new Adam of the new creation, then he's saying Jesus is the first human to enter into this new thing, right? The metaphorical, typological meaning then becomes clear. We're not saying that Jesus literally is Adam. We're meaning that Jesus resembles, represents, reminds us of Adam in a certain way. And what we need to do is go Adam, Adam, draw the line, connect the dots, and figure out what the meaning is. That is our first level. So the first thing we want to do is we want to pick a translation that is useful to our goal in understanding the text. Do I need to understand the text in terms of thought accuracy, in terms of word accuracy, or in terms of a little bit of both, right? So all of these translations are fine for certain purposes, is what I'm saying. What you're going to use the NAS version for is different than what you're going to use the Message version for. But if you ask me, which version of the Bible is best? I'm going to say, best for what? What do you want to do with it? If you want to read it so that you can understand the beauty of the language, I'm going to push you towards the Message. If you want to understand the beauty of the words because you want to do a Strong's Concordance word study, we're going to come over here to the New American Standard. If you want to read it because you want a version for using in church, where sometimes you're going to need it for thought and sometimes you're going to need it for word, we're going to put you in the middle here with the NIV, the CSB, something like that. All right? So, first lesson of today is there is no best translation of the Bible. In fact, I love to joke, and this is not my original joke, I got this from my professor, the best translation of the Bible is the original text. Right? This is the only one that is the text itself. It's not filtered through the process of translation on this spectrum of word accuracy or thought accuracy. So if you want to have the best translation, then you need to go to school and learn how to read Hebrew and Greek. Okay? Barring that, pick a translation that works for what your intended operation is. What are you trying to do? Okay? Then you're going to pick a commentary aid to help you do that text. Again, if you're over here in the word accuracy, then you'll want something like a lexicon or an interlinear, something to help you decoder ring the text. Okay? If you're trying to get more in the thought accuracy, then you're going to go over into a true commentary, right? Something from like Hermea or Word Biblical Studies or Evangelical Commentary of the Old Testament, right? You're going to go where someone has put it together and brought and helped you make the connections. Or you're going to use your Strong's Concordance and you're using it for a different function. Instead of opening it up and looking for what the definition of the word is, you're going to come in here and you're going to find all the parallel text, all the examples of that word in the Bible or in parallel literature, and you're going to do a crisscross, gezerah shava, connect the dots kind of thing, okay? So how do we interpret our Bible? The first step is we have to get a literal and typological meaning from the text. We need to pick a version of the text, a translation or the original, that we want to use based on whether we need accuracy of thought or accuracy of words. And then we're going to pick an aid, an assistant, whether we want to have, again, accuracy of words or accuracy of thoughts, whether we want to do more of the literal, grammatical, syntactical work with the text, or whether we want to do more of the typological, metaphorical, analogical meaning of the text. Okay, so that's how we're going to first study. And this is where you're going to build the foundation. You're going to put in all of the time here, laying the bricks, going through your passage, struggling with the commentary to understand the text first at this fundamental basement level before we can move on. So next week we're going to talk about drosh. We're going to talk about how do we interpret a text. Once we build the foundation of meaning and context, then we can build up to interpretation. So I'll see you next week.